Hello there, this is Rob Chadwick with ADL, and this is the 7th in a series of tutorials on using the Virtual World Framework Sandbox application. Last time we talked about how to create primitive objects, and we looked at the object properties. Let me do a brief recap. There's a whole set of primitive objects on the screen here. There are 5 different possibilities at this stage: cylinder, plane, cube, cone, sphere. The object properties window, which has the button labeled here. Object Properties window has the transform type-ins for you to type in the X, Y, Z, rotation, and scale. And it has the tweakable properties. In this case, I've got the sphere selected. The only thing you can change about a sphere is its radius and at what resolution the graphics driver is going to draw it. Well, this is a kind of limited palette of tools, but we've put some effort into making this more flexible by allowing each shape to have modifications applied to it. Each modifier is a node in and of itself, and it is kind of a child of the parent object. If you remember back from the hierarchy lesson, we linked objects together. Well, the modifier is really just an object that's linked to the parent, but rather than contain its own 3D mesh data, it modifies the parent's 3D mesh data. To create modifiers, you'll go to Create, Modifiers, and then pick one. You'll note that you have to have an object selected. Let me select nothing, and let me go to Create, Modifiers, Bend. No object is selected. I have to have an object selected, and that object will get the modifier applied to it. Let me go ahead and grab the box and pull it up in the air here so we can see it. Let me slide over. I'm going to hit the little target icon right here to focus my camera in on this box so we can really work with it. Very nice. So first, let's make it bigger. I'm going to turn up its height. And the number of height segments is important, and I'll show you why later. So I've turned up its height and its height segments. Now, because I've got it selected, I can create a modifier by going to Create, Modifiers, and let's go ahead and do the Bend. Bend. Now you'll notice in my Object Properties window, a new tab has appeared. Not only do I have the Primitive Box tab, which has all the settings we were just looking at, also I have the Modifier Bend tab, and this has settings of its own. Let's see what happens with its own kind of default settings. When I pull the amount up, the shape bends. Look at that. Now I can actually type in a greater amount right here. I can bend it almost all the way in a circle with 0.15, and I can just drag it back and forth. So that's really interesting. Each modifier publishes properties, and each one does different things. There's kind of a handful of them. I'm not going to go over all of the properties for all of the modifiers. I will show you how some of these buttons work. In this case, this modifier publishes enabled, disabled. We really should get all of the modifiers having an enabled or disabled property. Currently, not all of them have an enabled or disabled. But you'll see if I click this, I just create or destroy that modification. In this case, you'll note if I wanted to kind of bend it in the opposite direction, I could switch the axes. So now it's bending around the y-axis rather than bending around the x-axis. That's very interesting. But what's most interesting about this system is how the stack of modifications will reevaluate over time. So watch this. I go to the box and I turn down the number of height segments. You'll see that I get a lower resolution bent cylinder. There's a bit of a structure under the hood here, which causes the system to reevaluate the modifications when the child, or really the parent, shape is changed. So after I bend it, then I can go and change its resolution, and that will continue to work as expected. I can also change its height, and I can just curl this thing all the way around. Look at that. Obviously, with just 3 segments, it looks really funny, but I can turn up the length. Sorry, I was going for the segments here. I can turn the segments up or turn them down. You can kind of see how that works. That's kind of interesting. To delete a modifier, you can open the modifier panel in the object properties and just hit the delete button. This modifier is gone, and we're back to the base state of the shape. I want to show you something different. I'm going to turn down the height here because it's just a little bit tall for my purposes, and make sure the segments are all the way up. I'll go ahead and leave the kind of off like rectangular instead of square. I'm going to create modifiers twist. I get a twist tab. The twist is a simpler modifier. It has only one value, which is the amount. If I turn that up, the object twists around its z-axis. Probably we could extend this to say which axis to twist around. Currently, it just twists around the z. So I've got an object that's twisted on its z-axis, and here's the interesting bit, and the part that makes it possible to have a very wide space of possible shapes for you to be creative with, you can layer modifiers together. Create, modifiers, bend. So I showed you bend before. Now I've got primitive properties, twist properties, and then bend properties. This bend will bend the twisted shape. Bend the twisted shape. And just like I showed you earlier by changing the segments, I can go back down this stack of modifications and untwist the bending. So this is pretty cool. You can do all kinds of neat things with the modifiers. In a separate lesson, because this one is getting to be about that 5-minute point, I'm going to show you how to make a terrain out of these tools. And well, let's do that. But I'm going to wrap this up and save that for the next lesson. So here we've just talked about modifications, primitive objects, and you see all their properties. We saw this stack of modifiers and how they evaluate up and down the stack so that that you can change properties back in time, kind of, after you've layered these modifiers on top of each other. And finally, we saw how to delete them. Just open it and hit the delete button. One thing I should note is when you delete the object, you delete the child objects as well. In this case, if I delete the twist, I'm also going to be deleting the bend because the bend comes after the twist. And now I'm back to my box.